Welcome to the Ardan Labs podcast. Our special guest today is Ryan Henrich. Ryan, man, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Bill. I really appreciate it.
Dude, you got the bulldog. If you're watching on YouTube, what is that? A bulldog on the shirt, man?
It is. It's a buddy's coffee shop. I don't have a bulldog. I have a golden retriever. She's laying on the floor behind me, but it's a good coffee shop.
I didn't know if you're into college football, but I'm just thinking, like, even though it's blue, like Georgia, I'm like, oh my God, I got a Georgia fan here, man. We're gonna have problems. No, no.
No. I grew up in New England, so I'm not a Southern boy.
All right. We're gonna learn about all that on the show, but before we start that journey, give everybody the 2-minute spiel on what you're doing today. Keep it to just the present.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate that. So my name is Ryan Henrich. I run the security practice at a company called RapDev. We're a large systems integrator and engineering practice built on top of Datadog and ServiceNow, and so we help our clients with building out better and more mature security practices. We have a focus on cloud, but we sort of touch all things, and we focus on infrastructure security, and we have a managed security operations center, managed detection and response practice.
So this is for the shops that really don't want to get their hands dirty. They want experts sort of doing this.
Yeah, that's part of it. So we work with a lot of small teams who have, maybe one or two heads in security in total, but a bigger development organization, and they sort of don't have the bandwidth to manage, 24/7 on call and security incident investigation and things like that. But we do also work with a fair amount of larger organizations that do have kind of significantly sized teams, and we work as often as an extension of those teams. So we'll handle the tier one triaging, and so we'll be kind of the eyes on glass for that 24/7 operations. And then they can also use us as an escalation point because we've got architects and VCSOs and stuff on staff. So in the event of a fairly serious incident, we have resources that most companies don't have internally available to them at a moment's notice.
It's interesting to me that security and cybersecurity are becoming the big things right now. Like, there's a lot of jobs in this space all of a sudden where I think it used to be limited to a few people that were like highly educated. I'm starting to see more and more people say, yeah, I'm doing cybersecurity. I'm involved in that. I just find it interesting.
I think it's awesome to see. I agree. It's definitely changed, and especially in the last, kind of half decade or so. But I think we're seeing a similar movement that we saw in what we now refer to as DevOps, where there was kind of an explosion of data and the problems that got bigger. And so we were, a lot of companies threw a lot of bodies at solving these problems, and they were able to build faster and build larger infrastructures. And I think we're seeing a similar thing happen in security, which is driving this kind of additional workforce.
But I'm imagining, one, I hate the word security because it's just so generalized, right? If somebody says they're in security, I just start laughing because I'm like, dude, what does that mean? There's like a million points of potential, like, I don't use the word failure, but whatever the word is. And you just say security. Like, is when people ask me what I do, I just say I work with computers, right? Because I just don't want to get into it, right?
Yeah.
But I imagine that more and more people are able to get involved at some level just because the tooling's gotten better.
100%. Yeah, I mean, 100% agree. So like when I got involved in security, more than a decade ago, the core of the job, at least for the security that I did, which was more infrastructure-based security, was firewall policy development. I'm not going to go as far as to say that anything there was super sophisticated or complicated, but
networking is hard, Ryan. I don't want to hear it. Networking is hard.
Well, but firewalls are easy. Networking, the thing that actually made it all work behind the scenes, that part was super complicated. And I still remember back then there were I'm not going to name and shame some vendors, but there were some vendors that would like lie about their handshakes for VPN tunnels. And so if you had two dissimilar firewalls, they like literally wouldn't handshake properly, and so you couldn't. Like, I still remember like learning that stuff, and there was no, like, you could Google this as hard as you wanted. There was no answers out there. And so like I would just learn this, like, well, that's just never going to work. And then you call the vendor and they're like, oh yeah, it's not very well documented. And you're like, oh, sick. Like, that's just completely broken.
No kidding. Yeah. You guys are talking Italian and they're talking Portuguese, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's over. No, I know. Yeah. I still consider the VPN part of that just because I've had to set up a couple. My networking foo is it's not great. And like even setting up a VPN to me just pulls my hair. I'm glad that you have a lot of hair, dude, because if I was in your job, man, I wouldn't have this ponytail, man. It'd be all ripped out by now. So that's kind of cool. All right. So this is a podcast about you and your story and sort of how you got to, or how you're at RapDev. So a couple questions that I like to ask off the top. One, what year did you graduate high school and where were you on the planet?
So I grew up on the East Coast in a little town north of Boston called Marblehead. It's a kind of a historic fishing village. It claims to be the birthplace of the U.S. Navy, which the neighboring town Beverly also claims. So I'm not really sure which one got it. But the USS Constitution docked at Marblehead Harbor during the war, and there's a famous fort there. So it's a super cool place to grow up. I graduated high school in 2012.
2012. Is that like an hour and a half north of Boston, or?
If traffic's real bad, it could take you an hour and a half. It's
Okay.
15 miles as the crow flies. So it's
Oh,
usually about
okay. It's
45
not that
minutes.
far. Okay.
No,
Yeah,
it's not super
That's
far.
not that far. I've been to some areas north of like half an hour, 40 minutes north. I'm trying to remember the name of some of the towns, but
Salem,
yeah, I mean,
Massachusetts is probably the biggest one in that neck of the woods where the witch trials were. That's like Marblehead was a part of Salem in the I think 1600s and split.
and so so you had family that were like part of the Pilgrims. Can you go that far back, man?
No, my family
No.
immigrated in early 1900s. Yeah,
There
we're a
we
little
go.
late.
Yeah, nobody's a witch. I dated a girl back, dude. I went to university in the late '80s, but I dated a girl whose family was supposedly part of that witch stuff, man.
No way.
Yeah. Like, and she loves like the last time I talked to her, which is forever ago, but like she was learning and studying her family history related. I guess it's safe now to study the witches, but kind of interesting to think about that, right?
Yeah, so I'm over on the West Coast now, and it's wild how I meet a lot of folks who grew up out here, spend a lot of time with people who grew up out here, and the exposure to history is really different. The East Coast are the history starts
Okay, dude,
400
but
plus
you're
years ago.
like, I know, but you're in the middle of it all when you're like, I grew up in New York. Okay. So I have the New York history, but we're not from, when you go to Boston, you feel it, right? Like
hmm
you feel all of that, part of the history of the Revolutionary War and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a cool
I mean, you
part of the
got
country.
road signs all over town, like the blue and yellow sign, right?
hmm
This graveyard here, this house here, that like if you blink, you'll miss three of them.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's
it's
cool. It's
super
cool. Yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool. I drive to Alabama and dude, there's this historical mark on like US 231,
okay.
and then there's a marker that tells you the marker's coming up. It just cracks me. It's like, oh, there's the marker to tell me the marker. It's I don't know, man. Just try. It's funny.
Are you still in New York?
No, I live in Miami. I moved down here in '94, man. I was tired of being cold. I hate being cold. Just hate. I went to school up by like the Canadian border. I did 4 years of that. I graduated. I said,
Oh,
I'm done, man.
yeah, it's
Going down to
cold.
Miami. But you're in California, right? Where are you? Like San Francisco, Bay
I'm in
Area?
Los Angeles. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
Southern
Los Angeles.
California, so
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
in Santa.
yeah. Temperature's
Nice.
always the same every day, pretty much, right? I mean,
Yep. Yeah,
you pay
I did the
for it
same
though.
thing.
You pay for
There's certain ways you pay
it.
more.
But I already see Ryan's face. He's just, oh my god, yeah, I pay for that. All right, so you said you graduated in 2012. You said 2012 there in Boston. So second question here. Clear your mind. Clear your mind. Don't think too hard. I want your first memory of you hacking on a computer. First memory that pops in your head.
Oh, so young. I would have been probably 11, 10, 11. Um, my dad gave me his old BlackBerry that was no longer back when
BlackBerry.
Research in Motion owned the company. It was no longer
Yeah.
connected to any networks. And I don't remember exactly how I did it, but I probably screwed around with that thing for 3 months. And I got it connected back to like a basic GSM network and started to just use it.
What?
So there was obviously
Like
like
three
some
phone
silly,
calls?
no phone calls, but I could do texts and I could access the internet very slowly, obviously.
Wow.
And then I could play Brick Breaker, which was the thing I wanted it for.
Dude, that's wild, man.
Remember the little
That
thumb scroll wheel on the side of it with Brick
yeah.
Breaker? That was the best game.
I can't dude, that's a really good hack, man.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. That was kind of how I first got into. I hadn't really learned consequences yet, but I was like, oh, you can get stuff for free. Consequences came later, but yeah, that was
Yeah.
sort of where I got started.
At least you turn to the good side, not the dark side. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have the skills to cut it on the dark side. There's a lot of really clever people out there doing really cool stuff. It's a bummer they're doing it for the wrong reasons, but it's there's cool stuff we get to learn about.
I disagree. I always say sometimes to people like, just be really thankful I'm not bored, right? Because if I got super bored, I think I could learn the dumb stuff that you shouldn't be doing. But
Everything's learnable, man.
yeah,
Yeah,
everything's learnable, man. So if you're
100%.
bored, I call it being bored because you're not worried about paying rent this week, and
Yeah,
nor
bills
do you
and
want to go
life
out and have
and
a drink. Getting married and having a mortgage keeps you out of a lot of trouble. Talk to me about high school. This would have been like 2000, I guess, 9 through 12, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What kind of things were you into, man? Were you into sports, music, art, just anything else?
yeah, I was super into music. In middle school and high school, there were like preparatory programs at. I lived in Boston. There were preparatory programs at Berkeley College of Music and New England Conservatory, which is a jazz school. I did both of
What
those
instrument?
programs. Jazz guitar was my focus, but I sang. I did a whole bunch. I sort of played a little bit of everything. But jazz guitar was what I could actually sort of was competent at. I did a lot of that. I did a little bit of musical theater, played a little bit of sports, but computers were sort of a big calling at that point in my life, and mostly because at the time my like the school district I worked at, or sorry, went to school at, had pretty incompetent IT controls in place. And so we had content filterings all over like you couldn't go on YouTube and you couldn't kind of do a lot of the stuff that maybe hadn't become an educational tool yet, but was sort of obviously useful from an educational perspective. And also, if you had time in the library to screw off, I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And so I got really into that, and like that was my first. That was when I started like really learning in detail about DNS and how can I bypass DNS filtering, and then they got a little bit cleverer, and so I got a little cleverer, and it sort of culminated in. I'm not sure I should say this on a recording, but I will anyways. Pretty
Those
sure I can't
days
get in
are
trouble
over
for it
with, man.
anymore. But it's sophomore year of high school. We the high school I went to ran checkpoint firewalls, and they never changed the default creds, which, if I remember correctly, were like it was QWE 123 is like what all checkpoint firewalls shipped with back then. And so I got onto the firewall cluster and I disabled content filtering, and then I changed the admin creds so they couldn't fix it.
Did they
And
ever find out it was
I
you?
disabled console access, so they also like couldn't serial into it and fix it.
Dude, that's
And
evil.
oh yeah, so they never proved it. But my chemistry teacher was pretty sure it was me. And she was super cool. My heart goes out to her because
Was she responsible for some of that?
she so she convinced the school to build like a technology excellence board, and they put me on it as like the student rep. Which for me
Why
was
why were
really.
you first of all, why were you pinned? Because you were always on the computers in the school, like you had a rap from the teachers that
I think, yeah. I mean, I mean, it's been well over a decade now. I'm not really exactly sure how she knew, but I think, yeah. I mean, I knew what I was. I would fix stuff at the school. Like they don't, it was back. We all had in 2010. Every classroom had a projector where I went, but they never ever worked. And like teachers would want to use them, but they couldn't make them work. And so I would fix them in class because it would drive me nuts to watch them like
Yeah.
fail to fix it or fail to make it work.
Yeah. You had a rep that you were, if anybody in the school could have done it, it was Ryan, just
Yeah.
because you had a rep. Yeah. Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was a bit, yeah, I was competent at this stuff. So
You
yeah.
could have just went back in and reset everything, especially since they didn't have any logs on IP addresses. But I guess you did it inside the school anyway. So what the heck?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
would have been. It would have. I mean, back at because there was no. We didn't have. They didn't. They didn't have a domain controller for students, so like we didn't. We didn't have to auth to use like library machines and stuff. So like, how are you going to catch a kid when there's no like auth logs and like, yeah, there was a log in the firewall that somebody changed it, but it was the admin,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Right.
there's no way to prove like, okay, sweet, it was that desktop that did it. But,
That
like,
computer.
we didn't have cameras in the school back then, and like I don't like nowadays it'd be way harder to get away with this stuff, even with like basic tech, right? They would catch you. But back then, I mean, there was no logs, there was no camera footage.
Dude, in
Library.
1985, I walked into the guy. This is high school, 1985. I walk into the administration office where the guidance department is because I had to go see a guidance counselor, and I saw a PC on a desk, and I walked over to the PC. I mean, this is in almost the main hallway, but I don't know why it was quiet. Anyway, I open up the keyboard, and anyway, underneath the keyboard is the password for the entire machine. So I
Yeah.
log into the machine, right? And then I found the software they were using for the grade book. Of course, that had a password. Well, they had that password underneath the keyboard, right?
Obviously.
So suddenly I had access to all the grades, the software they were using for all the grades. But my heart was like freaking pounding, you know? So I put it all away. I told my other buddy who was a computer guy, he says, Bill, we got to go in there. I go, there's no way I'm doing this without eyes. So we go back in. He's my eyes. And I've got all the grades up. And I'm like, I look at him like, Jay, I can't do it, man. So I look to my right, and there's a box of the report card forms, dot matrix at the time, printers. We stole a thick pack like that out of the box. And we both went home and started printing out report cards for like everybody in school, man.
Awesome. So the trick on that, that's still a problem to this day. I mean, I haven't been in high school in 10 years, but like when I was there, I got into the grade book as well, just screwing around kind of before this whole thing happened, and I ended up changing everybody's grades.
I
Because
couldn't do it, man.
you can't just change your own. If you change your own, they're going to catch you.
Yeah.
So I just
couldn't do
changed
it.
everybody's, and like I just deleted all the test scores and shit, and they rolled it back. They were backups, so they got it all
They had
back.
backups.
But for a couple of weeks, it was pretty funny. Everyone was scrambling, and I think they knew it was me again.
Dude, I don't know, man. My stomach hurt. Like I just couldn't do it. I was too afraid. Like I didn't need those problems.
Yeah, that could have
But,
been pretty bad.
Yeah. But all right. So what I find interesting though, that if you're a musician, you got to practice a lot to get. And I imagine you had some bands maybe in high school too you were playing with. So that to me, so when I was in high school, at some point in high school, I was handed the computer and a guitar. The computer ended up winning. Like I couldn't do both, man. But
Yeah.
you seem to do both.
So I grew up in a sort of slightly incredible household. I'm really grateful for my upbringing. Parents are both super hard workers, really clever people who have done really interesting things with their lives. And we moved around a ton when I was a little kid. We lived in Europe and Asia for like a big part of my childhood, and then when we came back to the States, we had no TVs. There was a no TV rule. So like if you want to quiz me on TVs or movies, I will lose that all day, every day. I've seen almost no films. I've seen very few TV shows.
Wow.
Maybe less than 20 films in my life, and certainly less than that for TV shows.
Even now, as an adult, you don't go to the movies. It's just not part of your DNA.
Never. Because
You
I
have
was
a partner. Do you have a partner who likes TV or like friends? Like
Yeah, I
how
do.
does that
Yeah,
affect?
my girlfriend likes to watch movies and TV, and I just don't. I don't get like because I didn't grow up with the habit. I don't get engaged, and I don't get drawn in. And what little I do watch, I'm annoyed usually at like the amount of disbelief that I have to provide in order to think that the story is like interesting.
She doesn't even want you watching with her at this point. You're just like,
No,
leave me alone.
I
Yeah,
sit on the couch next to her and I shut up and I do other shit.
yeah.
But, but yeah, I sort of grew up without that, and so I had a lot of. I mean, you have a lot of free time, and so yeah, I played a lot of guitar, and I screwed around with a lot of computers, and that was sort of. I think, in retrospect, I think that was because I wasn't allowed to watch TV, and that's what all my friends would do. But I was allowed to screw around on a laptop. That was my, I was my screen time,
I
and I
see.
was a little.
Yeah.
And like we also have to remember, we're sort of. I'm not going to say we're in like the death of the internet or something like that, but like search has gotten way worse in the last 5+ years. And from like I think from 2000 to 2015, search like Google search and sort of the internet was an incredible place repository of information, and it wasn't. And we sort of in some ways poisoned it, and I think that's accelerating with some of the AI tools out there, and just the amount of bad information and sort of bad writing and search engine optimization. I don't think has been particularly useful from an informational perspective.
That's super interesting. Like we could do a whole show on that because I feel like you're right. At some point, search got very, I don't want to use the word bad, unreliable. And right now, AI isn't making it any better. I don't know. I just came out of Google I/O, and I feel like they're going to turn a corner soon with some of it.
I hope so. I mean, it's tough though because like I just remember. I mean, 10 years ago, if you wanted to like when you Googled things, you found forum posts, and forum posts were incredibly useful. People problem solving, and so even if they didn't have the solution to the problem, you could at least basically check their notes for how they were problem solving it, and that could help you get closer to an answer. And so, like for me, that was super useful because nobody spoon fed me the answer. They like I'd find the intel that helped me get to an answer, and helped me learn for myself. That I know now when I Google things, I'm not going to get that. I'm either going to get an answer or I'm going to get nonsense,
Yeah,
and
but
there's
you
no
know
in
what?
between.
That content, including like Stack Overflow, that content's dead now. It's dead. It's gone. It doesn't exist. Because everybody's now leveraging the large language models consumption of the internet for up to 2023. And so all that type of content it's just gone. Doesn't exist anymore.
And I try not to be like an anti-technologist, which is it's pretty easy to fall into like, oh, it's all getting worse. It's just going to get worse or whatever. But I tend to believe that it flows in waves, and so I think we're in a bad era of the internet. Not that it's a bad thing, but that it's the information on it is less useful, or it's less easy to get what you need. And I think we'll come back around. Like I do. Look, my passion outside of work is automotive, and like I do see there is an increase in the use of automotive forums again, where there was a death of automotive forums like maybe 10 years ago. They started to die out. A lot of it moved to Facebook groups, then a lot of it moved to like solo
YouTube
content
videos. Yeah.
creators on YouTube. And now like I see a lot of it is moving back to forums where there are people that are doing really, really interesting things, but they don't want to be a YouTuber. They don't want a YouTube series about it. They just want to document it and like, get help.
I think last point here, and we'll get back. I think one of the problems is the amount of content that's produced every 60 seconds on this planet. It's I still can't comprehend how there's enough hard drive space for the next minute because I travel all over the planet and it doesn't matter where I am on the planet, anywhere in Europe, Asia, South America, there is a large community taking pictures, posting pictures, talking about pictures, and it's all unique content in every little city on the planet. I don't comprehend how we have this much disk space. There's got to be somebody on this planet that all they do when they wake up in the morning to the time they leave work is just install hard drives.
Plug in more hard drives.
I don't understand it.
I mean, and think about it. it's not just the file that they've uploaded, like the picture or the video clip or whatever. It's all of the logs associated with all of the machinery behind the curtain that went and made that happen.
Yeah. Dude, I can't comprehend the scale of it.
That's
And
wild.
I see it in my own household, and it's or in my own communities, right? Go communities and stuff. But dude, just sit on a plane and look at the amount of content that was just produced over the like. I don't get it, man. But I think that doesn't help when you're a search engine trying to filter through this massive
Yeah.
amount of content.
And I think if you tie the creation of content with the like SEO was not a thing 25 years ago. Nobody optimized for search engines, right? And so
I
if you
was
tie
doing
those,
it. I was doing it in 2004 because that was my first business,
really,
dude. So here's the
you
funny.
must have been in a room of one.
Well, here's the funny thing, and here's the sad thing. Okay, I was starting a real estate business. We were putting AVMs before Zillow. Zillow was all over my site 6 months before they had launched. Anyway, I learned how to optimize so well on Yahoo that somebody had called me and said, your name is on a whiteboard at Yahoo right now because they're trying to figure out how you're number one in like all these
For all these
categories,
terms.
right?
Yeah, that's
But
cool.
now that's cool, right? Except the sad part is nobody that used Yahoo bought anything. So it didn't matter, right? Like
Yeah.
the people at the time, this is 2004 through like 2008, you had to be on Google because for some reason people on Google would buy stuff. That was a hard nut to crack. Google, I could get a couple pages number one, not an entire website. I could do that on
Yeah.
Yahoo all day long, right? So that stuff did exist in the turn of like the millennial. There were companies doing it, but
I think it's just gotten all a little bit too clever for its own good. And if you add in the explosion of content, it's sort of like, well, we sort of have algorithms fighting algorithms. How do I make my thing appear better? And then the search engine is trying to make good data appear and not your bullshit search engine optimized like AI crap. And so you just end up in this fight of like, it's just a pile of data and everybody's automating everything. Like I think there is a challenge to that. And
so here's a stupid thing I could do. I bet you it still works today. You did everything you could to get one page, even if it was on page 20 on the Google search. You just had to show up in the index somewhere for a search term. So let's say like this was the search term I cared about, and I finally showed up on page 20. So I would tell all my friends for the next 3 months, every day, do the search, find it, click on the link, and kill the browser. Don't hit the back button. Just don't hit the back button. Dude, I could get that page within like a few weeks, all the way almost to the top, right? But that was that one page. It was just one page, but I could do it. Like that silly popularity thing. That's what Google always cared about. But
but I bet
creating
that doesn't work
popularity,
anymore.
I bet you it does.
But I bet it doesn't because why wouldn't I just write a Kubernetes like a script and run a Kubernetes cluster that spun up 10,000
Because you would
services
need
that all load?
10,000 IP addresses. You
But
had to do it
AWS will give
across.
those to me. I mean, not give them to me, but they'll give them to me for 10
So
cents.
try it. Try it, man.
All right.
Try to take a page that's on 20, and every
Well, no,
day,
if I'm gonna do it, I got to do it to one of my own pages. Pick a
no,
RapDev page that's
one
way
of your
back in the
pages,
yeah.
one of your pages that's like on 20, and start creating popularity like that. As long as you don't hit the back button. And throughout the day, 20 people are looking at it, and they never hit back. And another 20 people look at it, and they never hit back. It's going to move. It's going to move
Okay.
up the index. All right. So look, dude. So when you're near the end of high school and you got to make that choice for what's going to happen next in your life, what are you thinking about? Is it music? Is it computers? Is it,
Yeah,
I
it
don't
was
know.
it was music. So but partly it was my own doing. I wasn't the most studious of high schoolers. And so I had maybe skipped a class or two and maybe not prepared for an exam or two. And so I knew my key to going to like a top tier university was through music. And so I ended up going to NYU for jazz guitar.
Nice.
And I'm not sure if I would have come to the realization on my own, but one of the one of the biggest gifts that NYU gave me specifically was Professor Rajinska. She ran the department at Steinhardt where I went. And she comes in, I mean, it must have been 6 weeks into freshman year. It's like right at the beginning of your tenure. And the programs are small. I think I had 35 kids in my class or 30 kids in my class. The programs are really small, and frankly, you have a huge ego if you got there. And I did, like, way outsized what I should have, because it's a good jazz program. It's not the best, but it's a good jazz program. And so you kind of think that you're going to be a musician. You're going to make money doing music. And kind of 6 weeks in a really healthy way, Professor Rajinska, the dean, she comes in and she sort of splashes cold water in your face. She basically goes, look, by the numbers, 5 of you are going to make a career in music. 2 of you will like actually be musicians that tour and make money and pay your bills. 3 of you will go teach. The other 25, like, you're going to find something else to do. And it's a lot easier if you figure it out now. And so, and like, that was the talk that she gave. I mean, it was an hour long.
To everybody.
It was much nicer than that, but she gave it to everybody. 3, 4, 5 months later, you're in practice, you're in rehearsal with all these other musicians. You're like, oh shit, they're getting better faster than I'm getting better, and they were better to start with. Like, I'm not going to make it into those 2.
Yeah, but how much of that was real and how much of that was in your head? Because I think a lot of people have it in their head they're not as good as the person next to them, and outside of the box.
Personally, yeah. Look, like for me, I know it was real. I had enough ego to apply to a really good jazz school and say that I could get in, and I did. And like, I do believe that at a point I was I was a very good jazz musician, but the kids that I was with were unbelievably good, and they were more focused than I was. I had other interests. Like, I liked computers, and I liked going out with my friends, and I liked, I liked all this other stuff. And the guys the guys and girls that I was in school with were maniacally focused on music. There was the one thing, and
they had no life beyond that instrument that they were.
And that almost sounds like an insult, but it isn't. They were just so good, and it was the thing that they cared about, and they were going to be better than anybody else, and they were. And that was not me. And so I figured out fairly quickly, sort of second half of freshman year, that I needed to engage my other interests. And so I took some computer science classes, and I screwed around a little bit, and I had some fun, and I learned a bunch of stuff. And so when I came out and I was looking for work, I got engineering jobs, and that's how I got into it.
Don't go. We're gonna get there real quick. So.
Here at Ardan Labs, we believe in empowering companies to reach their full potential through innovative technology solutions. Trusted by small startups and Fortune 500 companies alike, we specialize in high-performance software consulting, training, staffing, development, and now AI. With over 14 years of experience, Ardan Labs has trained over 30,000 engineers and served over 1,000 companies worldwide. Whether you're mastering Go, Rust, Kubernetes, Terraform, or blockchain, we're your strategic partner for performance-grade solutions. Let's elevate your tech journey together. Reach out to Ardan Labs today.
Did
you switch majors, or did you finish?
No, I stayed in the program. I don't entirely remember the decision making that went around that. I think there was some complications around transferring schools inside of NYU. I would have had to move to a different school, and so I stayed in the school. But they allowed you to take classes at the other schools, so I didn't need to minor. I didn't need to double major. I could just learn other stuff as well.
So you essentially finished your music requirements and whatever other liberal arts requirements you had, and then the rest of the time you filled with whatever engineering classes you could take.
Yep. And whatever interested me. It was great because I only had to take the stuff that interested me, and I didn't have to take the really hard stuff like discrete math or stuff like that.
But on this music program, at some point, do you switch to like a performing track or a teaching track or a...
It was a performing track. So there were I don't remember if there were distinct like tracks that we could have switched to. So the kids that came out of my school kind of ended up in 3 groups. They ended up in There were a few that went into teaching for sure. We have a couple of kids that became large scale performing musicians. Some of them toured with some A-listers, and one or two of them was a top 20 charting artist. They did really, really well. Some incredible music. And then we had this third track, which were like, there was a subset of us who became sort of technologists within music. And most of them focused on music technology, not like I focused on just technology. I didn't
Yeah,
care about the
it's
music side of it.
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you didn't get into sampling and all the other sort of
And so
stuff.
some of the kids
Because
that I went to school with, yeah, they ended up in video game design. They ended up in, one of them ended up working for the U.S. government on like somebody. I'm sure somebody listening to this will be able to find the patent and be way more clever about it. But it was like shot tracking based on microphone arrays on soldiers' helmets. I don't know if it ever went
wow.
anywhere, but they were like trying to pick out like where enemy fire was coming from. But it was basically time delays, right? We were just measuring the distance, the time difference between three microphones, and you could triangulate a sound source. So the kids worked on that, or people worked on that. Sorry, and
But
then
in 2016, you're graduating with this music degree. Do you still play, by the way? I hope you still play, dude.
occasionally,
Don't.
monthly, but I
You
don't
ki-
play like I should.
yeah, you're killing me, dude. You're gonna really play that damn guitar, man. Come on now.
It's not going to go away. It's never going to go away. It's just less than it should be. I got busy, man.
I know, but my dad was a sax player, um, and he played the big horn until he got too old. But he was always playing, man. Like it was nice to go to his house and he's just jamming a little bit in the backyard.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it was an incredible,
like
incredible instrument too. The saxophone is so.
he could. And what's funny about my dad is that I'm gonna tell you two stories just because you're a musician. He ended up getting drafted in the Marines for the Korean War, and he got lucky enough to make the band, so he didn't have to do too much combat, I guess. But he hated lugging the saxophone around, so he looked to see what the smallest instrument was in the band, and it was the piccolo flute. So he said he spent like weeks in the bathroom learning all the songs because he couldn't read music. My dad couldn't read music. And he did everything by ear. And then he tried out and he got the piccolo flute. So all he had to do was walk around with the little, this is my dad. And later in life, he tried to play with the bigger orchestras so he could learn how to read the music. But it was, I don't think it was a handicap for him at the end of the day, right? He played in bands and weddings, that kind of stuff, right? But it's just interesting. Like he could, I feel like he played the sax the way I can write code. I don't think about it. I just know where all the notes are and I can just do it without thinking about this. At some point, the mechanics disappear, right? And you're just playing because you know where the sound is that you want.
Yeah, I think there's so many great musicians across history that could never read music or didn't start reading music or never learned. It's interesting that you say that. Like, I know musicians. I went to school with folks that could read music like it didn't, like English. It just was irrelevant to them. It was never that for me. Like I had to focus, and I would generally like. I know so many people who could sit down in front of their instrument and like for the first time see a sheet of music and just play it for real. And like for me, I needed 15 minutes. Like I had to go read through it like 3 or 4 times, and I was like, okay, now I know what it is. And I never quite got over that hurdle. And I've always believed that it's like learning another language, where like I always got to I was at the point in music where I could be conversational and I could read and write and I could get around town no problem. But I wasn't the person who could think in the foreign language. And there's so many people like who can't. My sister can. She speaks many languages, and like she can just think in Spanish or French or whatever she wants. And I can't. I could never get there. I never quite got there.
Yeah. Even like right now, I'm teaching the 17-year-old how to drive, and I'm trying to tell her, you're thinking too much about the mechanics still of braking and turning. At some point, that has to disappear.
Muscle memory, and you just have to
right?
do it. Yeah.
Or you can't learn the next level of driving, which is how do we identify? So to me, it's like the same thing on the programming. It's got to be the same thing with the music. At some point,
100%.
to get to the next level, all that stuff has to just be, Yeah, muscle memory.
Yeah, and I got there with playing. Like I could play anything without thinking, but I could never read like that. And there are so many like that's like a next level of skill, and it's super cool. And I know exactly what you're talking about with the car. Like I drive like I'm in the passenger seat with folks. Uber drivers are a great example, and all the time you're like, oh, I know you're still thinking. Like this is not smooth. Like you never crested that like thing. And then you get in the car with somebody who has, and it's just like dramatically different. You're like, oh, this is lovely.
Have you ever heard of the Crane School of Music? So my state university in upstate New York, Potsdam, had the Crane School of Music, which was back from the 19th century. Apparently, they were a decent music school. I didn't go there for music. I went there for computers. But I lived with a bunch of musicians. And one of my buddies was a guitar player. And I was dating a girl named Angie, and she broke up, and he wanted to like mess with me. So he sat in the same room with me for 20 minutes, making the dumbest ass noises you've ever heard on the guitar. And I finally said, Mike, what are you doing? You're driving me crazy. I said, Bill, hold on. I almost got it. And now he's playing more nonsense. I'm like, Mike, I can't take it anymore. He goes, I got it, Bill. And he starts playing the Angie song from the Stones perfectly. And I'm like, first of all, I'm like, you're an asshole, dude, because I just broke up with her. But then I'm like, how did you do that? How did you just turn all this noise into the song,
Yeah.
right? Like, so whatever his brain was doing to figure out the chord progressions and the notes and everything, it sounded like, I couldn't tell you what the song was until he said, I got it. That was like mind blowing to me.
Putting the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah. It was mind blowing to me when I saw some of that too. Okay, look, you've got this music degree, but you love computers. Your resume at this point shows music, right? There isn't much there on programming, IT, ops, unless we want to bring in all that stuff you hacked on in high school. Like, how do you get this first job? It's 2016. I mean, the economy's pretty good. It's not, I think it's a good time to be looking.
Yeah. First job, basically irrelevant. I got hired as a test engineer, which not that isn't a really important job, but for entry-level test engineers out of college, they'll sort of hire anybody who's willing to do the documentation work to do this correctly. But that wasn't what I wanted to do, and I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do from day one. I wanted to be in security. I was interested in it, and so I probably had that job for 6 months, 9 months. I don't know. I was immediately applying to security jobs, and I found this little consulting company in Andover, Massachusetts, which is about 45 minutes northwest of Boston. And it was a consultancy. They did a lot of work with checkpoint firewalls, which I had just a tiny bit of experience with for the wrong reasons. And they were hiring an entry-level security engineer. And I got in touch with the recruiter that was hiring for the position and lied my ass off about how I was qualified to do this job. And she put me forward I got through recruiter screening, and she put me forward to the hiring manager. It's a man named Jay Bendonis. I'm going to send this to Jay because he'll appreciate this. And he sent me an email and asked if I could come in for an in-person interview. And so I came in for an in-person interview. And
did you wear a suit? Were you wearing a suit that day?
I did. Yeah, I wore a gray suit. And no tie because I think it's unnecessary.
But you had the suit. I don't even think people. I mean, interviews are like online. Nobody wears a suit anymore. So yeah. Anyway, go on.
So I show up to the interview, and we sat in this conference room. It's this little carriage house in downtown Andover. It used to be a horse stable. Super cool old building, and we sat in the conference room for probably 20 minutes, and he was entertaining me, shall we say. I was still lying about my experience, and at some point there was like a voice in the back of my head, which was my mother, telling me that you can't lie your way into a job, and like at some point you're gonna have to tell them that you actually don't know what you're doing, but you're willing to learn. And so I probably shut that voice up for another 10 minutes, and then eventually I gave into it, and I said something to him, and I was basically like, Look, I gotta be honest here. Like, I know a little bit, but I haven't done any of this shit. And but I promise, like, I can learn. Like, I can learn anything you put in front of me. I will learn it. And he just goes, "Yeah, no, I know. I was wondering how much of my time you were willing to waste." Um,
Oh,
and then so two things happened, which and I'm not going to do them all justice, but the first thing he said is, "Look, security is a job about being observant." So you told me at the beginning of this conversation you were into cars. The parking lot had about 10 cars in it. He was like, "What cars are in the parking lot?" And I knew the cars that were in the parking lot because I'm obsessed with cars. So I just knew all of them. And I knew a bunch of the years too, which was definitely like I definitely got bonus points for that. And he was like, "Okay, like you're paying attention at least." Um, and then he said, do you know what your CCNA is? Do you know what a CCNA is?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "It's a test. It's an exam it's a Cisco networking exam. Do you think you could pass it?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problem. I could pass that. No problem." And he goes, "Okay."
without even
How,
knowing what's on it. Yeah.
yeah, he's like, "How long do you think it'll take?" And I was like, "Oh, do it next week." And he's like, "Okay. If you get," so he's like, "I'm going to give you a month. You can start on Monday, and you have a month from Monday to pass your CCNA. And if you pass your CCNA, I'll give you a raise." So he basically paid me 20,000 under the ask for the job. But if I passed my CCNA, I'd get the ask for the job.
Sure. That's
And
fair.
so I was like, "Okay, this is interesting." And then I was like, "So how is there material? Like, where do I go get the material for the CCNA?" And he had the books, which there's like three of them, and they're like it's like this much paper. And so he pulled them out from behind his desk, and he was like, "Here's the CCNA books. It's fucking 1,000 pages." And he was like, "You can come into the office if you want. You don't have to come in. You can call me and ask questions if you want. I don't need to see you until you pass your CCNA, but you have a month to do it. And if you don't get it done in a month, I'm gonna let you go." And I was like, "Okay."
I, I love that. Why not?
And so
Did you go to the office every day to study?
I did go to the office every
Good.
day to ask
Good.
him questions. And on day 20, I took the test and failed because they have that. I think it was an 8-day window. You couldn't retake within 8 days. And on day 30, like literally the day before it was all due, I passed, and he kept me on.
Wow.
And
Were you
that was like,
feeling? I'm curious when you took it early so you could take it twice. I think which was a great strategy. I don't know if they tell you what you got wrong on the test. That would have been nice.
they do not. They just give you a
Okay.
score. I got low 50s, and I think you needed an 80 to pass or a 79 to pass.
Were you
I was
expecting to pass
far
that
off.
first time? You just wanted to see where you were at.
Well, I was hoping I could pass that first time.
But that's a big difference. If you have to get to 80 and you were like just above 50, I would have been nervous for 7 more days.
So for me, a huge part of why I wanted to take the test twice was learning the mechanics of the test.
Mm.
Because they don't, in the prep materials, they don't explain to you like how they're going to ask you architecture questions. The huge part of the test is obviously there's sorry, I forget what it is, CCNP or something, like there's a architecture level exam, and it's not that, it's the entry level exam, but there's a bunch of early architecture questions like, how would you set up this network so that these things can happen but not these things. And so I didn't, at the time, I had no real networking experience, and so I needed to learn. I took the test early so I could learn how they would evaluate those questions, and then I could go and learn in not the material really, but I could learn how to answer the question,
Yeah, yeah,
which
no,
is
no,
what I
that was
went and
smart.
spent the next
That was smart.
8 days doing.
Wow. Was the guy like, was he impressed? Was he shocked?
He was shocked. He was like, "I wasn't going to fire you, but I didn't think you were going to get this done." And Jay's been awesome in my career. I worked for him for almost 2 years, and
So I wish I had Jay here. Jay sees this cocky kid who's got a great personality, but needs to learn a lesson. And Jay's going to make you learn this lesson, except you turned around and passed the damn test. And all he's thinking is, this damn kid, he was supposed to fail so I could teach him.
yeah, it put me on a treadmill. I mean, it was awesome. And then the reality of the job is that your CCNA is meaningless in terms of actual skills on the job. And I still had to learn everything the hard way. And there were a lot. I mean, it was the best job to have gotten started with because you in consulting, you see everybody's networks, you see everybody's security programs, you see everybody's failures, and you see what they've done well. And so like, we had some biomedical clients that like I would sit in their offices in Cambridge until like 4 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out why the VPN tunnel wouldn't work.
Yeah. I
Um,
hate that. I hate that. I
eh,
hate that. That's why I don't do ops,
but
Ryan.
like
That
that's the
drives me
way to
crazy.
learn.
I know, but I get so. That's why I like software. I can fix my own bugs, right? Like, this isn't bug fixing. This is trying to find some piece of documentation eventually that tells you about a setting in combination with another setting that it finally works. I don't have the propensity for this.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend like I enjoyed doing it, but I enjoyed the problem solving of it and figuring out like everything I did every day. Every day there for 2 years was new. I had never done it before, right? And we worked with all of the different variants of checkpoint firewalls. The state of Massachusetts was a big client of ours, and they had these, I think they were called 61Ks, and they were like the big boy checkpoint firewalls. They ran a different version of Checkpoint OS. And so like just when I was starting to feel comfortable in my life, like I had figured like I knew what I was doing now, and I all of a sudden like I've got this new firewall that's also checkpoint but doesn't look or act anything like the other one.
Called progress, Ryan. It's called progress. I hate that. Why'd you change it? The other one's fine. Progress.
Yeah, this one does more. I'm like, oh, sweet.
Yeah,
I didn't
only,
need that.
so you're there for 2 years, like up till what, 2018, maybe 19?
2018, yeah,
Okay.
maybe I don't think it was quite 2 years. I think it was 20 months because I
So
wanted
what
to go do
happens?
cloud.
Why?
So about 6 weeks in or 8 weeks into that job post CCNA, I caused a major outage for our biggest client.
Welcome to the
Um,
club.
yeah,
It's a rite of passage.
it's not a question of if you'll cause an outage; it's how big the outage will be.
When?
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and so on a Friday, the names will be redacted because I'm pretty sure all these guys still work there, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble. Mostly myself. But
Don't say names. Yeah.
on a Friday night, our contact for the state of Massachusetts, which was our biggest client, emailed us and said, hey, it was like Friday at 3 p.m. or something like that. Hey, we need to make a firewall policy change. Our ops team wants to deploy this new application over the weekend. I'm the guy on call. I received the email. Good news, I don't have to do what he said because our change window is on Tuesdays and all requests have to be made by Thursday. So I don't have to do it. And so I emailed him back and I was like, hey man, great. I will, I'll have the team and I will review it this week and we'll get it in for next Tuesday's change order. Not 3 days from now, but like the following Tuesday's change order. Um, you know, thanks for the message. We'll get this done for you on, let's say November 15th, whatever the date was, doesn't matter. The gentleman at the state of Massachusetts didn't like that answer. And I worked for a very, very small company. And so Jay, the guy who gave me the job, he was my boss. His boss was the owner of the company. It was really, really small. The state of Massachusetts, the contact of the state of Massachusetts emails the owner and CCs me, like forwards my email to the owner, basically. And it was like, hey, what the fuck? Like, I need this done. And so the owner, who's a great guy, he calls me and he goes, I know it's not in the change window, blah, 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 but like, can we just get it done for him? And it's like, yeah, it's not a big change. Like it's Friday, it's 3 p.m. I was working from home that day. I lived in downtown Boston. And so I was like, yeah, no problem. I'll make the change. And, friends are coming over in like an hour. We're going to go get sloshed this week. We've got a big night planned. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll get this done right now. And then I'm going to stop working. And so I console into the checkpoint firewall. And the way the state of Massachusetts had it at the time, and it's not how they have it today, but the way that they had it at the time was basically everything routed through a centralized high availability cluster in Adams, Massachusetts. Which, if you aren't familiar with Adams, Massachusetts, it's a little bit like Potsdam, New York. It's nowhere near what you think of as New York. It's 4 hours west. It's literally on the New York State border. Is Adams,
Okay.
Massachusetts is borders with New York State. Um, and so I make I console into the checkpoint firewall, and I add the policy that I'm making a change, and that it's going to change the routing. No big deal. I check the routing is good. Sweet. apply policy. Usually the checkpoints kind of freeze up on you for like 45 seconds and then they reload. 2 minutes goes by, it hasn't reloaded. So I'm like, oops.
Stomach starting to hurt.
But I'm like, not a big deal. Not a big deal. I can VPN into one of the other firewalls and I can console in from there and I can fix whatever I've done. Turns out what I've done in the route is I've removed, when I made my routing change, I removed internet access for those 2 firewall policies.
Did you realize
Sorry,
that?
for those
At
2
the time,
firewalls.
I guess you had no idea that was going to happen.
So I should have known, but I didn't double check my work because it was Friday and I was planning on having a drink. And so what I've done is I've pushed a valid firewall policy to an HA cluster that fundamentally breaks its ability to work. And so every site across Massachusetts tunnels through those firewalls that are now no longer connected to the internet. And they don't have another route out. So what I have just done is every single state of Massachusetts infrastructure endpoint is hard offline.
Yeah, you can't even get to it until you get to the physical box at this
I
point.
can't get to anything. So, but it's not just me. Now it's Friday afternoon, so it's not like the state house cares, but the state police route through that. So those laptops they have in cruisers, they don't work right now. Literally nothing worked for the entire state of Massachusetts. And so on Friday, so now it's Friday at 4 p.m. and I'm now having a full-blown panic attack. I'm 6 weeks into a job I really want. And I'm certain I'm going to get fired on Monday. And I have to go drive to Adams, Massachusetts
To
so
get
that
to
I
the
can plug
physical
a
box.
serial cable into a box so that I can undo the fuck up I've just done.
But
And
you need a key to the building to get to the box.
so the good news is we physically had the key. It was at our office in Andover. So on Friday afternoon at 4 p.m., I go sit in traffic on 93 and 95 North to go to Andover, Massachusetts, to get the key to drive to Adams, Massachusetts, so that I can make it to the cage, which I make it to at like 9 p.m. And then I spend a good 2 hours figuring out what I've screwed up. Because it's not like they had like a clear syslog that told me exactly what I changed, just that I had made a change. And so now I've got to revert back, and I don't have a firewall backup because I was the guy responsible for doing the backups, and I hadn't done them in like 3 weeks. And so like I'm trying to undo all this.
Lesson.
Oh, it's a couple of lessons were learned. So I'm trying to undo all this screw up, and probably 11:30 at night is when I get everything back online. And then I drove home, and I make it home at 2 o'clock in the morning. I've now missed the night out with my friends, and I'm certain I'm getting fired on Monday morning. And for me, the lesson of that story wasn't to double check your work. It was, this is fundamentally a bad way of doing computers. The whole point of network infrastructure is that I shouldn't have to physically go touch anything. And so all of it, like for me at that point, I was like the cloud, like I had never understood at its core why people gave a shit about the cloud. It was like, it's just somebody else's data center. Why does that matter? Like if I can own it cheaper myself, I'll own it cheaper myself. All of a sudden I was like, oh, no, APIs, that's the thing. That is the thing is I never have to physically touch anything, which means you're never going to have me fly to Texas to plug hard drives into a machine. Somebody else is doing that in Texas and I'm renting the machine. All of a sudden it all made sense to me.
But even Facebook had this problem a couple of years ago, right? Where somebody fat fingered something and their entire existence on the internet disappeared.
Yep, and AWS has done this. I mean, everybody does it, right? And that's why, like, ultimately on Monday morning, and kudos to the consulting company I worked for, I was not fired. I was not even reprimanded. They asked me to explain what I had learned, and I gave the correct lesson, which is you should double check your work and probably shouldn't do firewall policy changes on Friday night, even if the client wants you to, and even if the boss's boss wants you to. And like, there was a lot of learnings in there.
You weren't fired because you got in your car and you solved the problem, dude. And I worked in shops where we had something called the boot. It was like a 16 size sneaker. And when somebody did something like you did, you basically fixed the problem. Then you put the boot on your desk until the next guy screwed up, which could be 5 seconds later or 3 weeks.
Oh,
and
awesome.
we would write it down, which you did, and put it in the boot. And at the end of the year, we'd start pulling out all the papers and reading them and laughing,
awesome.
right?
Yeah.
Because at the time it's a crisis, but at the end of the year, when you read that, you just start laughing because You don't get fired because you got in your car and you went and solved it. You didn't say, "Hey, this is your problem."
Well, this is the attitude that I think you really have to take, and like it's something that I've kept really near and dear to my heart since that is like we do cool things, and we solve hard problems, and we build things that people use and rely on. But at the end of the day, 99% of my work, like I don't, it's not brain surgery. I'm not, somebody is not dying on my table because I did this wrong. Like revenue was left on the table, right? These are problems, but nobody died because of it. And so like as long as you go and fix the problem, I'm super supportive of anybody that wants to go and break shit and figure it out and then make it right. Because fundamentally, like would I be supportive if this was an operating theater and we were cutting people open? No, that's the wrong way to learn. But in the way that we work, right, in technology, like absolutely, just go do stuff. It's fine. We'll figure it out.
You know what's funny is when I had the boot on the few teams that I ran, if I had somebody who didn't get the boot at the end of the year, I questioned what they were doing all year.
Yeah,
Right?
you
I
weren't
was
pushing
like,
yourself.
yeah,
If you
you
didn't
weren't.
screw up, you were not pushing
Yeah.
yourself.
I don't need somebody trying to safeguard their existence to not get the boot because that means we're not moving at the level I want to move at. Right. And I would tell people that, like at the end of the year, I go, I don't want you to make a mistake to get the boot. But at the same time,
You should screw
mm,
up. Yeah, 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 yeah.
right, at the same time, you're not pushing yourself hard enough.
Yeah, I mean it's like skiing or racing or whatever. Like if you're not pushing yourself, if you're not falling or if you're not screwing up, then you're not pushing yourself that hard. You're just sitting, sitting on your heels. Which is fine. You can have a great day doing that, but like if you go a whole year, then you're not doing it. You're not pushing yourself.
No, you're just coasting, and I don't need that. So, but you're only there for a little less than 2 years. Oh, because you wanted to get into the cloud. So, what was the decision?
So this is so I realized this probably 8-10 weeks in, right? So as I did my CCNA, and about 6 weeks later, I caused the outage, and so I was like, okay, I want to do the cloud. And I spoke to. It probably took me another month or two to build the courage to talk to my boss and the owner of the company about like I want to learn the cloud, and they were like, sweet, we don't have any cloud customers, but if you want to go run or build our cloud practice here, we're happy for you to do that, which is such a cool thing to give it. I think it was 22 at the time. It's such a cool thing to give a 22-year-old like the right to go break shit and try stuff out. But the reality that I learned very quickly is you can't like something as big and as important for me as an educational journey as learning cloud and learning kind of modern tech stack was not something I was going to be able to do completely on my own. And I couldn't sell clients on the idea of the cloud if I didn't fully understand it. And so I probably burned a year chasing that dream with them. I still did a lot of the day-to-day security stuff for our on-prem clients, but I was trying to learn cloud in my free time, and I did. I learned a lot, but I was not. I by no means had any sort of mastery of it, and I wasn't ready to sell it to anybody as a like I couldn't have done a migration for somebody. And so I sort of poked my head up. I told them I was going to do this, and they were okay with it. And I poked my head up, and I started looking at cloud technology companies, and how can I go make a jump into a security company that is born like that is really cloud native, cloud ready, and that's where I'm going to learn a shitload really fast. And at the time, there was this tiny little company in Boston called ThreatStack. I think there were 80 people, and they were $1 million or $2 million in ARR. They were a very small company, and they were hiring for a solutions engineer for the East. I lived in Boston. The company was headquartered in Boston. They needed an SE for the East. I like talking to people, and I've got at the time I had pretty good tech skills, so I was like, all right, I'll do that. And so I interviewed, and I had a demo audition and like all that stuff, and I made it through the interview, and I got hired to that job, and I learned a very important lesson then, which is you should really, 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 really do due diligence on the technology, because the first lesson I got was, holy shit, this stuff doesn't work. Oh, fuck.
Wow,
Like
their
I'm now
product
responsible for selling this to clients and the product doesn't work.
doesn't work. It's vaporware. That's what I call it.
Yeah, and it wasn't because it didn't function, but it didn't solve problems. And so I fooled myself into like, oh, we can do this because it technically worked. But it didn't solve anybody's problem, and so you're basically selling people you were selling them a treatment they didn't need. It wasn't the problem that they were trying to solve. And so that's not a great way to live. And so I figured that out very quickly. But I didn't know exactly what to do because I was learning a lot about the cloud and I was talking to a lot of really interesting companies, and I was learning about their problems. We just weren't selling anything.
This was more of a sales engineer
This
than
was a
actual
sales
like.
engineer, solutions engineer. Yep.
Okay.
And but I was learning a lot about the cloud because everybody basically opened up their, these were very modern companies with very small security practices or no security practice. And so they're sort of opening their doors to us being like, well, how can you help us? And so I learned a lot about their problems and I learned a lot about how to help them. And I did a lot of research on my own and, talked to other clients who were solving the problems. And it was really, really good, but I knew that I couldn't stay there because the solution didn't solve anybody's problem. And at the time, I flew out to an AWS event in Santa Clarita, um, in California, and there was a guy named Vikram Kapoor who gave a talk on a data-based solution for cloud security. And I found that really interesting. Like it was data first,
Database
not
solution.
database, not one word,
Okay.
data first. And
Data first.
so rather than trying to create what was essentially a policy based, like a firewall policy for intrusion detection, he had this thesis that they were going to build an algorithm, an ML model that could ingest all of your data points from the cloud. So it could ingest all your network connections. It could ingest all your process spawns. It would know it'd be user aware. It would, it would know it would know all of the things. And then it would build an ML data model for every client that said, here are the actions from start to finish across your environment that are normal. This is what you do all day, every day. And then every single time there's a new set of actions, I'm going to ask you if it's normal or not. And this was the theory that he presented on at this AWS event. And I was like, that's the problem that our clients are having because they can't fundamentally build a rule to define everything that could be wrong in their environment. We need a way to help automate what we were really talking about was automating the creation of rules. And I went and found Vikram Kapoor as soon as he got off the stage. I was like, we have to talk about this. Like, this is a thing that I need to know about. And it turns out he was the technical founder of a product called Lacework. And it was not out of stealth yet. And there was no team. It was 10 people working at an office at Sutter Hill Ventures. And I got introduced. And I said that this is the coolest, this is the problem. And probably a month later, they had hired in a CRO.
What's CRO? That's a new term.
A chief revenue officer. So they had hired in basically a sales leader who wanted to start taking the product to market. And he flew out to Boston, had dinner with me, and said, "If you want to join Lacework, now's the time. I need a guy who can be an SE, but also can be an architect and kind of do all sorts of other stuff for the company. But I need him to live in California." And I lived in Boston. It was I think we got dinner on Thursday. And
Are
by
you
Monday,
single at the time? You're single, or you got a partner?
I was not single at the time.
Okay,
but I didn't ask anybody's permission. On Monday, I lived in California. This was 3 days later. I had an apartment in Los Angeles. I didn't ask any questions. I was down.
Dude, that's okay.
And so I went.
That's fine. You didn't even have a conversation with your partner at the time. It was just I'm moving. You weren't living with anybody then.
No. This is probably one of the I'm not proud of this moment, but she actually didn't find out for about 6 months because I didn't tell anybody for about 6 months. So for about 6 months,
how could you date somebody and then not know for 6 months where you're living?
Because I would be in Boston for the weekend. So Monday through Thursday, I was in California, and Friday, I would fly back to Boston.
Dude,
and I would hang out with all my friends. Well, VC money sometimes will just pay for shit. Lacework was willing to pay for it because I had moved so quickly, and I was like, look, I can come out now, but I need a couple of months to get my life together and move all this stuff. But I need to be in Boston for the weekends. And so
you were on the red eye Thursday every night.
Correct. Yeah. And then I'd work from home on Friday because my apartment lease wasn't up. So I had the place in Boston, and I would work from home in Boston. And then Friday night I'd go out with my friends. I'd go out with my girlfriend at the time. Saturday we'd hang out, we'd party. And then Sunday we'd have the Sunday scaries, and I'd get on the night flight back to LA. So I'd get on the 9 p.m. flight. I'd land at midnight, and I'd start
Nobody
working on
knew.
Monday. Nobody knew.
And you did that for 6 months.
It was probably a little less than 6 months, but yeah, it was 5 or 6 months, and
That's insane, dude.
yeah, and then everybody found out all at the exact same time. So all my friends in Boston found out at the exact same moment. I sent a group text to like everybody we used to hang out with and party with, including my girlfriend. I probably should have had a separate conversation with her.
I might have had a conversation there.
Yeah, and I just group texted everybody and I said, "Look, hey, FYI, I live in California now, and my going away party is tonight." And we had a night, and I flew out the next day.
Well, your buddies were okay with it, obviously, right? Like you know,
I mean, yeah,
yeah,
then
they're
I
buddies.
fell out of touch with a few of them since then, but nobody's mad about it.
No,
One
no,
of my
no, no, no.
buddies, yeah, I mean, one of my buddies was like, "I've always wanted to live in LA." He was like, "Can I crash on your couch?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Didn't really know at the time that he would crash on my couch for 3 months, but he now lives out here, and he's married a wonderful woman, and we still, I still see him every week.
That's wild. Your parents didn't know either.
My parents did know; they were the people that
They
knew.
did.
They were the only people that knew. My both of my parents have been such like incredible coaches for me, especially in my career. And I think they both did a lot of things right. They both did a lot of things wrong, and I'm willing to learn from their mistakes. I don't need to make all the same mistakes. So they helped me a lot, kind of problem solve and make things happen fast.
That's wild, man. Just gone. See you later. Nobody even knowing. I do that red eye every once in a while. I just did it recently last week. Dude. Even if you're young, man, that's a brutal flight. Can't really sleep on that flight. I don't care who you
No,
are.
dude, I couldn't do that today. I mean, I can do it occasionally. Like I still do it occasionally, but I could not. If you ask me, all the money in the world, but you've got to spend every single weekend in Boston, you got to do that red eye. I don't think I.
I like to been the. So you never had the personal conversation with this girl. It was text and that was it.
I actually never spoke to her again.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy, man. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Your current girlfriend, does she know this story? Does she know that? Because now she's gonna be like, if you ever do that,
She knows an abbreviated version of the story.
I will find you. I have a special set of skills.
Yeah.
She's gonna do the Liam
Liam Neeson? Yeah.
I will find you.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Well, man, that's a dangerous story right there, dude.
Yeah,
Okay,
we had some
so how did that work out? How long were you with this company?
So Lacework was, it was an incredible experience. If I wanted to name everybody that I owed thanks to, there's probably 200 of them. It was an incredible group of people. So I was employee probably 15 over there. It was really early, and we were $0 in revenue. I think maybe we had 400,000 a year in revenue from one client. We had the right technology at the right time, solving the right problem, and we went from $0 to $100 million a year in 3 years.
Wow,
which was crazy.
What a number!
Trajectory.
I mean, I get to that. I call it printing money at that point, right?
and look, that is how all the investors looked at it. Like we had everything, we had all the wind behind our backs. We were untouchable. It was nobody was going to beat us in cloud secure. Blah 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 blah. And we got a lot of big names to put a lot of money behind it. And our final fundraising was at an $8.3 billion valuation. And that was mostly to do with the growth rate, right? We had a problem that grew like a weed and nobody could touch us. And maybe three things happened. Two for sure. The third might have happened. We now had a big target on our back, right? We had raised $2 and change billion at an $8 billion valuation, which means there's only one exit available to you. You have to IPO it. That's the only way to get out of this, right? There's nobody that's buying companies that size, especially with that revenue number, right? If we were $1 billion a year in revenue, fine, there are buyers, right? Somebody out there's got $10 billion, then they'll take a 10-year payback, but not at $200 million, not at $100 million a year. They're not gonna buy you, and so your only option really is to IPO, and so you have to continue that growth rate, and that was failure number one. We could not continue to grow at that clip. And that was fundamentally that was an execution failure. we put too many bodies in the organization too fast without the right plan to train and enable them and to get them functional. And so we had this technology that was 3 years ahead of everybody else. And we had a sales team of, I don't know, 300 people, but nobody knew what we did. Like 250 of the sellers literally didn't know what Lacework did because we hadn't appropriately trained and enabled them. They didn't know the problem statement. They hadn't lived it. Like the early team, we had all lived it, right? Like I had been on the customer side, and I had been the solutions engineer at a company that couldn't solve the problem. So we had all lived the problem. And then we hired all these people that hadn't lived the problem. And so like that was, but it wasn't their fault. It was that we didn't know how to train and enable them. That was at a core, that was our problem. And so like from an execution perspective, there was that. And then we also had a product development perspective where we had made, in the early days, we had made a lot of decisions around build faster without thinking about how this scales. And basically for the last year that I was there, we released no new product because we were just trying to fix problems in the product. And if you're a SaaS platforms die when they stop releasing new product because the clients don't trust that you're going to continue to innovate, and this guy over there is going to innovate. And so what happened was 3.5 years into my run, Wiz launched with a fervor, right? And they got to, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, so I'm not even going to try and say it, but they got to a huge revenue number in year one, bigger than we had gotten to in our first year. And in year two, they beat where we were. And they had the same benefits that we did. They had a problem that the market understood. They had a solution that worked. They had the wind at their backs. And
were they taking existing clients, or they were taking the new clients?
They were doing both. And Wiz, from an execution perspective, they did everything that we didn't do right. And they hired a lot of our really good people. They had a really good training and enablement program. They were out being thought leaders. They crushed it. They did everything that we should have done, and they did it right after we did it. So we had spent all this money educating the market on the problem statement and how we were going to do it and how we solved it. And then they came out with a very similar solution, and they were just faster at doing what we couldn't do better.
And leveraged all the dollars you spent educating people.
And it was like, a bunch of the guys that I hired into Lacework, because I ended up running solutions engineering and architecture over there for the West for a few years. I hired a lot of SEs, and not all of them, a lot of them went to work for Wiz, and they had a great financial outcome. They built a great company. They just sold the thing to Google for 20-something, 30-something billion dollars, a ton of money, right? Great outcome. Do you have the number up?
No, I was looking at the website and all the customers.
Here, I'll pull the number up really quick, but $32 billion, right? Like awesome, right? These guys, they all made a bunch of money. They had great outcomes, and that's exactly what you want. We wanted it to happen to us.
But from there to how do you end up at RapDev?
How do we go back to consulting? Yeah. So one of the biggest problems that we had at Lacework was, and we were a heavy automation company. Most of what we did was completely automated from a security perspective. The clients didn't really have to do a ton, but you can't automate everything. And so what we had a lot of customers that had customer requirements that somebody was eyes on glass 24/7, that there was a SOC. And what I learned was that our clients weren't buying security because they were afraid of the government. And they weren't buying security because they wanted to do good security. They were buying security because they were contractually obligated to do X, Y, or Z. And a lot of those contractual obligations come with people. There was a people requirement in a lot of those obligations. And one of the biggest problems that our clients always had was they couldn't hire fast enough. They couldn't hire enough people. They couldn't retain the people. What's the average tenure in security? It's 18 months, right? So they were just on this, it was just this shuffle, this treadmill of how do we get these people?
A hamster wheel of just on and off, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's kind of a crap experience if you're at one of those companies. And so I wanted to be in consulting, and I wanted to go build a service that could solve this problem for folks. And I believed fundamentally that if we treated our security engineers and our analysts really, really well in consulting, and that we paid them over market, and we gave them good benefits, and that we gave them good time off, and all the other things that you want to do, that you could go build a practice that can solve problems for customers, and we can be sticky at those customers. They now don't have to go hire security personnel that turn over every 18 months. They can hire me, and I'm not going to go anywhere. And so I coupled that with, so that I knew that's what I wanted to go and do. But fundamentally, how do you go and do that, right? You can go and partner with a bunch of security technologies and build out, a SOC for Splunk, and then you can, some guy calls you and says, hey, I need somebody who can do this for Securonics. And I just go, yeah, we'll do it for Securonics, whatever. And then I've got my SOC that's working in 10 different tools. And I've always taken the approach that I learned from the kids that I went to college with, which is do one thing and be better at it than anybody else. And so we are maniacally focused on a singular platform. And so that was really important to kind of my vision on how we were going to do this. And I believe that, and this is we could talk about this for about 10 hours, so we can come back to it, but I believe that DevSecOps was this term that was used a lot in sort of recruiting and marketing bullshit 5 years ago. And I believe that those people don't exist. Nobody should be DevSecOps, but that should be a tooling. And I believe that dev teams, ops teams, and security teams fundamentally need to share the same tooling because they're looking at the same data. They just look at it different ways. And so that is how this practice was born on top of Datadog. Datadog has become kind of the platform for modern DevOps companies. And from the security perspective, they are there now. They have a real security platform that does a lot. And so my view of this was we need to help our clients put their security data where their teams are already living. And if I'm going to be their security team, I need the kind of the hands-on keys who are in the customer's environment. I need the DevOps engineers to be on board with what we're doing. And the only way that I'm going to get that is if I meet them where they live.
That's fair.
And so that's how this practice got born.
What does the ServiceNow give you? I know what Datadog gives you, right? It's all the telemetry and the metrics and all the data that your systems are producing. What does the ServiceNow provide?
So when we talk about data, the service on Datadog, the stuff that I work on, we focus very closely and carefully on the security side of the house. And so from a Datadog platform perspective, there are a whole bunch of different security products, but the way that I break them out, realistically to make it kind of easy to consume is there is a SIM, which is your log and your incident tool for your platform. There is a workload detection capability, which is kind of historically referred to as host intrusion detection or network intrusion detection, HIDs or NIDs. But in a more modern twist, it's also like Kubernetes aware or Docker aware, container aware. So it's sort of more than your traditional HIDs and NIDs, but it's we call it workload security. There's vulnerabilities, so it's aware of code vulnerabilities, it's aware of host vulnerabilities, it's aware of container vulnerabilities, and so on. And then there's also a posture management. CSPM is what Gartner had called it for ages. Cloud security posture management, and so it's basically the configuration of all your resources in the cloud compared to best practices. And so like those are the kind of four core use cases on top of Datadog. Security. And then our team, we run a 24/7 security operations center based entirely in the US. Most of our resources are former military. They're still TSSCI cleared. And we operate inside of our customer's instance of Datadog. So all of the detections, all of the correlations, all of the dashboards and monitors, everything that we build in their instance of Datadog. And so it's theirs to own. And then we operationally support all of the incident investigation, we support the triaging, and we provide reports back to the customer, which is like, hey, here's who, what, when, where, how, blast radius, potential impact, actual impact. Here's how do we prevent this problem from happening again? How do we fix it? And how do we automate this in the future? And all of that we work with our clients to implement.
I get nervous when I see Datadog and Grafana, only because of the amount of data you start collecting and how expensive that gets, right? There's a massive cost. Forget about your cost of having you there to help. I mean, how do you manage the cost of because you always start off saying, I want to track everything. And then you get the bill. And you're like, okay, what do we now not track?
So Datadog the way platform-wise, the way that we do this is called indexes. So there's a Datadog index for SIM, this is where the real data volume comes in, right? SIM. And there's a lot of data that are relevant to ops teams that are not relevant to security teams, and there's a lot of data that's relevant to development teams that are not relevant to security teams. And so we filter a lot of that data at ingest. If it's not security relevant, then it doesn't need to end up in the SIM, and so we don't need to drive the cost model up for that. And so, like I was working on an exercise this morning with our SOC for a client that we've just onboarded, and we're focused right now on they're bringing in, I think it was 3 billion Windows event logs per month, and that's I mean, first off, that's just a shitload of data. And secondly, how am I going to use that? Like, what am I going to do with that data?
Right.
And so we first dug into, like, okay, what are the actual event logs that they're bringing in? Because this is more Windows event logs than we've seen from any other customer that's a similar size. And what we found out a few things. One, they're logging every single file read on every single machine across their entire environment. So it's like 2,000 machines. And every single time a file is read, it's logged. That is not security relevant to me unless it's a specific subset of config files. So
Yeah,
very
I'm not
easy.
even. I mean, we're talking low level granular.
Yeah. So that's like okay. That's getting filtered at the edge. That's not relevant to me. That's not helpful. Now, are there some exceptions? Yes. There's a few different parts of the file system that we did want to monitor the reads on. And there's a bunch of places that we want to monitor edits or writes. So we kept those in place. But we pulled that down. That cut the volume almost in half. And it was like, okay, what's the other stuff that's happening here? Well, one of the things that we noticed was that we're getting Windows auth logs from both the domain controller and from the endpoint. Now, there's an argument there to say that both of them are relevant, but like,
Duplication.
client doesn't care. And we had a conversation with them. We were like, look, I want to log the endpoint auths in case somebody gets around the domain controller. I don't care. At this point, I'm not going to logging both is not going to add value, and it's literally just doubling your ingest cost. And that was 1 billion events per month. So we cut that in half to like 500 million events per month. And so there's a lot of that you can do in order to make sure that the data that you're bringing in is good, because fundamentally at the end of the day, like, we don't want to log anything that we don't have security detections on. That doesn't have any value for our clients.
It's noise, and it's CPU cycles being used everywhere for
correct.
noise.
And it comes back to, like, we were talking a little bit about the dead internet earlier, dead search engines. Like, if I plug so much data into this that I'm not getting that I can't get value out, then I'm in a worse position than if I had just been more careful about what I put in the platform in the first place.
Yeah, the garbage in, garbage out argument. All right, we got a few minutes left, and I want to spend the next 2 or 3 minutes listening, hearing from you. What are you looking at for the next 6 to 12 months in terms of new features and staying relevant? And obviously, the word AI is going to come into this conversation. So, where are you? Because you just said you die the moment that you're not innovating. So,
yeah,
where are you innovating over the next 6 to 12 months? And I can't imagine that AI isn't a part of that.
Yeah. So look, I think there's two things that I want to talk about. One, from a security perspective, at scale, organizations are still not good at the little things, which are the important things. And so, like, for me and my clients, one of the biggest things that we're pushing is infrastructure as code scanning. How do I prevent you from making stupid cloud configuration mistakes before they've been made? And that's something that, like, all of our clients at this point are on board with doing, but it hasn't been done for everybody yet. So, like, to me, this is a no-brainer. Like, we have to go and do this. If we don't do this, everything else that I want to do, that I put AI on top of, anything I want to go and build, like, fundamentally, I've still got the front door unlocked. So, like, this is stupid. And so, like, that's the first thing. And so that is the thing that I'm pushing really hard on. But from an innovation perspective, there's no innovation there. Nothing there is new. I'm just helping people operationalize it better. So, like, that's really
Where does that
important.
stuff run? Does it run in a CI environment or in a GitHub action? Or
if you do it well, you run it as part of the CI. So you run it as part of the pipeline, so that we basically As part of the pipeline, we inject a scan of, like, let's say the Terraform module that you're pushing. We say, hey, you've got two S3 buckets in here that have public read and write on. What are you doing? Right. And there's like, this isn't tagged as our website, like whatever. And so like, that's a very easy thing for us to go and implement. And then if you want to take it a step further, most of the pipelines will allow you to break a build if you meet certain thresholds. And so we'll set up like, hey, we basically score things on a scale of like 1 to 10, and we'll say, look, anything that's a 10, I'm sorry, we're breaking that build. Anything that's like an 8, you just need one other person to sign off on. And anything that's below that, it's a warning. If you believe that this is the right thing to do, type a sentence on why it's the right thing to do, and we'll let it go. And then that data comes back to the security team, and they can go, well, you've done this wrong, and then that informs our ability to go and rescore these things over time. So if we see a lot of people are pushing like 6s and they've got bad reasons as to why, we may go rescore that particular incident in order to make sure that like we do have to get a second set of eyes on it. But the innovation question is really important. What are we doing to continue to innovate? We're doing a ton I don't like calling it AI because I don't think that we're there yet from a technology perspective, but we're doing a lot with ML models, and we're doing a lot with data gathering on the investigation side. And this is helping our team be way more efficient and deliver way faster, way more accurate results to our customers. And then we have this other thing that we're working on, which are these agent runners, when we want to go and take action in environments to basically auto heal. And these are not, like, from a topic perspective, these are things that that teams have been doing for the better part of a decade now. But historically, we had to be very prescriptive about exactly what we scripted and how we scripted it. And today, we can feed a model into it and say, if it looks anything like this, go make this happen. And so we're able to get a lot more prescriptive, where like our agent runners are, they're pulling Stack Overflow for like repair guides on shit. It's like we're able to do some of that work, which is really interesting. And then it basically returns a script that you can automate the running of using a Datadog agent runner. And so that's a lot of the stuff that we're pushing right now from a development perspective internally, and hope to see it in client hands this summer.
Nice, dude. Nice. All right, man. We are completely out of time, but this was a fun conversation, man. I hope that this weekend you pick up your guitar, man. Play a little jazz.
I'm gonna do two things this weekend. I'm gonna play a little guitar, but I'm gonna see if I can SEO a page with automation.
With that little trick. It's gonna work, man.
We'll give it a try. Let's see.
All right, Ryan, we'll put it in the show notes, but if anybody wants to reach out and talk to you after listening to the show, what's the best way?
Yeah, please do. So my RapDev email is super easy. It's ryan.henrich@rapdev.io. Email me anytime. Would love to chat. You can LinkedIn me as well. You'll find me, Ryan Henrich at RapDev. But email is great, and we'll chat. And would anybody who needs help with security, I'd love to chat. Or if you just want to talk, let's talk jazz.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, this is the Ardan Labs podcast, signing off with Ryan and Bill, and we hope to see everybody again real soon.